Okay, so hello once again. I am Mike, and your tour guide to Foucault's Discipline and Punish. And this is part two of the book, and we're covering the next two chapters. Now, this first chapter is called Generalized Punishment. So, we ended the last video, or the last chapter, with a problem that was emerging from these public executions. People did not like when they felt these punishments were unjust or overly cruel for something like a petty crime. So, on the first page of this next chapter, Foucault highlights how the public execution was too analogous or too symbolic. In other words, people could see the confrontation between the condemned man and the sovereign. It was putting up one against the other. It was putting the violence of the sovereign versus the violence of the condemned man. And perhaps people believed that the violence of the king was a little bit more violent than the actual condemned person. On top of that, this violence from the sovereign is rooted in revenge. So, perhaps people believed the way to fight against these vulgar displays of revenge was to match the violence and fight back with more violence, to fight back with revenge. So you get riots and whatnot. This is obviously not good when your subjects begin using your own revenge punishment techniques against you. So this is one of many reasons that we moved toward a more allegedly humane way of punishing. In other words, we didn't just wake up one day and decide, oh man, torture is really wrong and we gotta improve humanity. And we're just, we gotta evolve or something. Now, this is one very important aspect of Foucault's work. There are never singular movements or singular moments that are entirely responsible for a shift in the direction of societies. So yes, we had reformers and we had philosophers that were opposed to torture, but we also had explicit political interests to stop torturing. So we had riots and we had distress, right? An entire field was emerging of opposing and coinciding interests that came together in just the right way to begin to question the technique of torture. So we got to get rid of the idea that suddenly we became more humane. And instead, perhaps humaneness is the effect of what changed. But it is not the principal cause. There is no principal cause. For example, another reason that we left torture could be that because maybe the standard of living increased. So there was less abject poverty, less desperation, less violence from the sort of thing that causes violence in impoverished areas. However, this produced new forms of crime, new kinds of illegal ventures, more specialized crimes. And as we all know, rich people are punished far less severely than poor people. So with new crimes, this gave rise to new forms of punishment, but also the need to define what all of these new crimes were. So this is what he's talking about with the increase of illegalities. Additionally, according to Foucault, reformers were more concerned with the abuse of power and the irregularities of the court system, as in the person or office could overturn, this particular person or this particular office could overturn any ruling from some other area. Or this office is paid directly by the king who happens to be protecting this person over here. So all of these loopholes were found everywhere because too many individual offices and officials had too much power. This amounts to what Foucault describes as a badly regulated distribution of power. That's on page 79. So too many people could say that they were directly representing the king's interests. Okay, now to this last part of the video. He goes into this vocabulary that's really difficult to understand. He talks about the semiotic of punishment. Now, if you're like me, you had to read this a couple times. But let's break it down a little bit. So, semio comes from the word semiotics, which has to do with signs and representations. So, what does that mean? What is a sign? A sign is something that means something to someone. So, if you think of a stop sign, it means stop your car, right? This is a conventionalized sign that everyone recognizes. Now, you go to Europe, you see a stop sign, it might be in a different language, or it might just be a red hexagon or a red octagon. Still, we recognize it as a stop sign because there is a direct relationship to the conventional sign, to the conventional stop sign. What Foucault is saying is that a major technique of punishment was creating conventionalized meanings within punishments so that they appear to have a direct relation, a direct link, a direct, transparent meaning. So if you steal, you use your hands, you get a hand chopped off. Anyone who has their hand chopped off becomes a sign or a representation of both a thief and punishment. And the society that agrees that this is the conventionalized sign of theft. So that chopped off hand should encode a pain of the idea of pain. That's page 94. And what must be maximized is the representation of penalty, the sign of the penalty, not the actual penalty itself. That's page 95. So there was a concerted effort to make the idea of punishment certain. We should know everyone will be punished in this certain way. We should be certain of guilt. And we should be punished in a certain way that makes perfect sense. In this sense, the goal was for people to internalize these chains of significations, these relations between signs. Now, this was a technique at the level of ideology as opposed to the level of spectacle and direct work on a body that you could see. Now, this was seen as more effective than terror and works directly on what Foucault calls the soul, or the modern soul. So just remember, whenever he uses words like representation, or signs, or images, or semiotics, or semiotechniques, or signification, just think about how these signs become linked to one another. Okay, so I just noticed that this video is already about 10 minutes long. It just so happens that I plan to break right here anyways. So I will see you guys in the next video. I'm Mike Mena once again, your tour guide. See you soon.